There's an old woman who sits on a bench outside almost every apartment building in the world. She doesn't know your name. She doesn't know your job, your relationships, your struggles. But somehow, she has an opinion about all of it. And here's the strange part. You probably do the same thing she does. You just don't sit on a bench to do it. You know the type of person I'm talking about. She watches you leave the building in the morning and quietly notices what you're wearing. She sees a young couple walking too close, too fast, too happy, and something in her face tightens. She hears that a neighbor is getting divorced, and by the evening, she has already decided whose fault it is. We laugh at the grandma on the bench. She's become a meme, a symbol of judgment, gossip, nosiness. But if we're honest for a second, we all have a little bit of her inside us. You've caught yourself doing it too, scrolling through someone's photos and thinking, why would she post that? Watching a stranger yell at their kid in a grocery store and instantly deciding what kind of parent they are. Hearing about someone's financial mistake and feeling a small, quiet sense of relief, comfort, almost satisfaction. We don't like admitting this part of ourselves. It feels petty, small, unkind, but it's not random, and it's not really about them. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Judging other people is rarely about the other person. It's about managing our own fear. Human beings are wired to constantly ask one underlying question, mostly without noticing, am I safe? Am I doing life right? Am I okay? We can't directly see the answer to that question. There's no meter on our forehead that shows life success, 74%. So instead, we measure ourselves against other people, constantly, automatically, watching someone else's life, their choices, their mistakes, their relationships, gives us something to compare ourselves to. And when we find something to criticize in them, something quiet happens inside us. For 1 second, our own uncertainty gets a little smaller. If she's a bad mother, maybe I'm not doing so badly after all. If his marriage is falling apart, maybe mine isn't so unstable. If her outfit looks strange, maybe my own choices are more normal than I feared. Judgment works like a mirror trick. Instead of looking at our own anxiety directly, we throw the spotlight onto someone else, and for a moment, we feel steadier. This is why judgment spikes exactly when our own life feels shaky. Notice, the grandma on the bench isn't judging when her own life feels full and calm. She judges the hardest during the loneliest, quietest hours of her day, when she has nothing else to hold on to except watching other people's lives from a distance. The same happens to us. You judge someone's relationship the hardest right after your own relationship had a rough night. You judge someone's career choices the hardest right when you're unsure about your own path. You judge a stranger's parenting the hardest when you're secretly afraid you're failing as a parent yourself. Judgment isn't cruelty. It's usually self-defense wearing a disguise. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Judgment isn't only a defense against fear. It's also a way to create a feeling of control. Uncertainty is uncomfortable for the human brain. We hate not knowing what will happen, why things went wrong, or what someone else's choices mean for our own future. So when we judge, she shouldn't have done that. He deserved it. They should have known better. We're quietly telling ourselves a story where the world makes sense. If bad things only happen to people who make bad choices, then bad things won't happen to me because I make good choices. It's comforting. It's simple. And it's mostly an illusion. This is why people judge victims of misfortune so quickly. An accident, a scam, a job loss, a breakup. Not because they're heartless, but because blaming the person gives the judge a strange kind of safety. If it was her fault, then the universe is still fair, and I'm still protected. The alternative, admitting that bad things can happen to anyone, randomly, without any warning, is far more terrifying. So the brain avoids that thought by judging instead. That's the twist. Judgment isn't really about morality. It's about managing fear of chaos. And there's one more layer to this. Judging someone else also lets us avoid looking at something in ourselves that we don't want to face. Psychologists call this a kind of projection. When we're most irritated by a trait in someone else, it's often a trait we're quietly wrestling with ourselves. The person who judges others as lazy, the harshest, is often someone terrified of their own tendency to procrastinate. The person who mocks others for being too emotional is often someone who suppresses their own emotions until they leak out sideways. We don't judge randomly. We judge our own reflection, dressed up as someone else. Think about the last time you judged a stranger, a coworker, or even a friend. Now ask yourself, quietly, honestly, what was going on in your life at that exact moment? Were you anxious about money when you judged someone's spending? Were you unsure about your relationship when you judged someone else's? Were you overwhelmed as a parent when you judged another parent? Most of the time, if you trace it back, you'll find the judgment wasn't really about them at all. It was a symptom, a signal, a quiet cry from your own nervous system saying, "I'm scared, and I don't know what to do with that fear, so I'll put it on someone else instead." This doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. Every single person alive does this. The kind grandmother on the bench, the confident coworker, the loving parent, the wise old friend. All of them, at some point, quietly borrow someone else's life story to steady their own. Maybe the next time you catch yourself judging someone, a stranger's outfit, a friend's decision, a couple's relationship, you don't need to feel guilty about it. Just get curious instead. Ask, what am I actually afraid of right now? Because underneath almost every judgment is a hidden question about ourselves that we haven't dared to ask directly. The grandma on the bench isn't really watching the world. She's watching her own fear, just from a safe distance, disguised as someone else's story. And so are we.